It begins with silence. A silence so vast, it could swallow the sound of your own heartbeat. Out there, beyond the orbit of Neptune, a faint traveler drifts through the cold. They call it 3I-ATLAS. An object not born here, not bound to our sun. It came from somewhere else. Another star, another system, another story entirely. For months, telescopes across the world watched it, a glowing speck against the black. To most, it was just another cosmic visitor, another rock passing through. But to the few who understood what they were seeing, there was something different, something wrong. At first, the numbers lined up perfectly. Trajectory, velocity, brightness. Everything obeyed physics, until it didn't. The light curve, that delicate heartbeat of reflected sunlight, began to twist. It pulsed unevenly, bending against every computer model we had, as if it wasn't drifting freely anymore, as if something was steering it. You have to imagine what it's like in those observatories. Dim red lights, rows of monitors flickering with raw data from space, and in the quiet, a handful of scientists staring at numbers they don't yet understand. At first, they blamed the instruments, a calibration glitch, a software misread, simple human error. But the errors didn't stop. They grew. Each new set of readings told the same impossible story. The light wasn't fading naturally. It was bending deliberately. Every few nights, the brightness shifted in patterns that no dust cloud or rock could produce. Too clean, too rhythmic, like a code written in light. Somewhere in Chile, a researcher leans back from her screen. Her breath fogs the cold glass of the observatory window. And as she watches that single dot move across the black, she whispers to herself, "Why does it feel like it's watching us?" She laughs softly after saying it, embarrassed by her own thought. But the feeling doesn't fade. Because that's the thing about space. It reflects more than light. It reflects questions. And this one feels like it's asking something. Days turn to weeks. And across continents, scientists begin noticing the same anomaly. The light of 3I-ATLAS shifts not with randomness, but precision. Tiny fluctuations, repeating every few hours, like a silent rhythm, like breathing. Theories begin to spread quietly. Whispered in late-night emails and private forums. Could it be breaking apart? Could it be spinning in an odd way? Could it be something else entirely? But no one dares to say the word aloud. Not yet, because that word, the one everyone's thinking, doesn't belong in scientific journals. It belongs in movies, in myths, in the spaces between logic and fear. Then, one morning, the news breaks wider. A group of amateur astronomers, operating from backyard telescopes, confirms the readings. Different hemispheres, different equipment, same impossible result. The light curve isn't random. It's intentional. The object dims and brightens with almost mechanical accuracy, as if responding to something, as if it's alive. Now the world begins to pay attention. The headlines call it the thinking comet. News anchors laugh nervously, calling it cosmic coincidence. But behind the jokes, you can hear the unease. Because deep down, everyone remembers what happened with Oumuamua, the first interstellar object ever recorded. Long, flat, tumbling strangely, and accelerating for reasons we still can't explain. And now, another one. 3I-ATLAS, different shape, different path, but the same impossible behavior. At NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, a team runs simulations around the clock. If it's natural, they should be able to predict its motion. But every time they project its orbit, the data slides just slightly off course. It's subtle, less than a fraction of a percent, but enough to make the entire model collapse after a few weeks. It's as if someone keeps nudging it, tiny adjustments, tiny corrections, like a hand guiding a ship through the dark. Meanwhile, the telescopes pick up something even stranger. A faint distortion in the background stars, as though light itself bends around the object more than it should. Gravitational lensing? Possibly. But for an object this small, that's impossible. Unless it's surrounded by something we can't yet see. Some kind of field, a halo of controlled energy. Or maybe something reflecting light back toward us on purpose. No one says it outright, but the implication hangs in the air. This isn't just an object passing by. It's an observer. Days stretch into nights, and the silence deepens. Every telescope stays locked on the same small point of light, as if the entire planet is holding its breath. And in that stillness, the human mind does what it always does. It begins to wonder, what if it isn't random? What if 3I-ATLAS isn't alone? What if it's being followed? By now, the anomaly has drawn the attention of every major space agency. Data from thermal imaging shows faint shifts behind it, something smaller, colder, invisible to the naked eye. At first, they think it's debris, then perhaps a dust trail. But the motion doesn't match. The shadow moves with it, in sync, always the same distance behind. Like a moon orbiting a body that isn't big enough to hold one, like a companion or an escort. And for the first time, the term artificial object appears in an internal report. Not in bold, not confirmed, just whispered between lines of data. A quiet warning hidden in the noise. Astronomers don't sleep much that week. Every time they close their eyes, they see it. That speck of light sliding through the dark, carrying secrets no one can name. It's not fear they feel, it's something heavier, something close to awe. Because if what they're seeing is real, it means we are not just looking out into the universe anymore. The universe might be looking back. And so they keep watching, night after night. Each shift of light, each data point, each flicker on the screen feels like a message written in a language no one yet knows how to read. But one thing is certain, 3I-ATLAS isn't moving alone. Something is following it, something silent, something patient, something that knows we're watching. It started as noise, a quiet whisper buried in oceans of static. Most people wouldn't have noticed it. A soft flicker hidden deep in the data, drowned by the hum of the universe. But someone did. A young researcher at the Mauna Kea Observatory was combing through light readings from 3I-ATLAS. Her coffee had gone cold. Her eyes were tired, and then she saw it. A rhythm, a heartbeat in the dark. Every 11 minutes, a pulse, faint, precise, perfectly timed. She stared at the numbers for hours, replaying the signal, thinking it must be a calibration glitch, a machine error. But the rhythm didn't fade. It repeated, over and over, like the universe was tapping its finger on the glass. By morning, the data had spread to other observatories: Chile, Australia, South Africa, different hemispheres, different telescopes. And yet, all of them reported the same thing: a pulse every 11 minutes, synchronized across the world. That's when disbelief turned into silence, because space doesn't work that way. Nature doesn't keep time that precisely. Not with light, not with distance, not over billions of kilometers. Something or someone was controlling it. Picture it: a team of scientists huddled around glowing screens at 3 a.m., their faces pale in the blue light. No one is speaking. The room feels heavy, like the air itself knows something they don't. One of them finally breaks the silence. He leans in and whispers, "It's not spinning." Another researcher looks up. "What do you mean it's not spinning?" He points to the data. "If it were rotating, we'd see an irregular light curve. But this," he gestures to the graph, "this is a signal. It's too perfect." A few seconds pass before someone else mutters, "Then what is it?" No one answers. Across the world, data scientists recheck their instruments. They swap servers, rewrite code. They even simulate light interference, trying everything to prove it's an error. But no matter how deep they dig, the result stays the same: a pulse every 11 minutes. Unbroken, unexplained. It's as if something inside 3I-ATLAS is transmitting, not randomly, but deliberately. Soon, the whispers spread. In private chat groups and encrypted emails, researchers share their suspicions. It's too regular. It's not natural. What if it's artificial? That last word, artificial, hangs heavy in the air, like a forbidden thought. Because once you say it, once you even consider it, you can't look at the data the same way again. The next night, the pulse changes slightly, not in strength, not in timing, but in something subtler. Its brightness begins to shift in small, encoded patterns: bright, dim, bright, bright, dim, almost like binary. Astronomers hesitate to say it, but it's what they're all thinking. It's a message, one that's been traveling for millions of years, only now reaching our world, only now being noticed by the few who dare to look long enough. The deeper they dig, the stranger it becomes. The light pulse isn't tied to the object's rotation or solar reflection. It's independent, like a beacon switching on and off from within. And when researchers run spectral analysis on the light, they find something even more bizarre. Within the frequency range, there's a faint harmonic echo, a secondary pulse, lagging behind by exactly 0.13 seconds. That shouldn't be possible. Light doesn't echo, but here it is. Like two voices whispering the same word from across eternity. The world's space agencies take notice: NASA, ESA, JAXA. They form a quiet working group, no press releases, no public statements. Because how do you tell the world that something in deep space might be talking? Instead, they call it a light anomaly, a safe phrase that means everything and nothing at once. But inside those closed meetings, scientists argue: if it's natural, what's the mechanism? If it's artificial, who or what built it? And if it is a message, what happens when we decode it? Then comes the night that changes everything. At the Arecibo Observatory, a storm knocks out half their sensors. But during those last few minutes before the blackout, they capture one final transmission, and it's not a single pulse. It's three quick bursts of light, then silence. Not random. Not background noise. 3 flashes, then nothing. The same pattern repeats 11 minutes later. Then again, over and over. 3 pulses, silence. 3 pulses, silence. To the human eye, it means nothing. To the human heart, it feels like a knock on the door. Days later, the phenomenon goes public. The world is divided. Some call it data manipulation. Others call it the first contact event. But through all the speculation, the object itself remains silent. Cold, distant, unmoved. It doesn't slow down. It doesn't turn. It just keeps traveling. Steady, patient, indifferent. As if it has already delivered what it came to send. And yet, back in those observatories, a few researchers refuse to stop watching. They notice something that doesn't make the headlines. Something small, but chilling. Every time the pulse repeats, the surrounding starlight bends. Ever so slightly. Almost like the darkness itself is breathing. It's not a visual distortion, it's physical. Something massive, invisible, lurking just beyond the object, distorting gravity in ways our instruments can barely detect. And that's when the fear begins to spread. Because what if the pulse wasn't coming from 3I-ATLAS? What if it was coming from something behind it? In a single week, everything changes. Teams abandon their initial assumptions. Mathematicians try to model the gravitational ripple, but the numbers make no sense. The mass required to create such a distortion would be enormous, far larger than the object itself. But there's nothing there. No visible structure, no dust, no light, just darkness. A darkness that moves when 3I-ATLAS moves. That pulses when it pulses. That follows, like a shadow with purpose. The final recorded signal arrives unexpectedly, stronger than ever before. 3 bright flashes, then 1, then another, and then, for the first time, a pause that lasts twice as long as usual, as if it's waiting. Then a single pulse, so bright it blinds the senses. When the light fades, the readings return to normal. The object continues its path through space, unchanged. But for those who witnessed it, something inside them changed. Because maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the sound of a message being sent. Maybe it was the sound of something awakening. And as 3I-ATLAS drifts deeper into the dark, the silence it leaves behind feels heavier than ever. Because now, the question isn't whether it's alive, but whether it's alone. It should have burned. That's what every model said. That's what every law of physics demanded. As 3I-ATLAS moved closer to the sun, nearing its perihelion, the point of maximum heat, it should have been glowing like a furnace, molten, radiant, but it didn't. Instead, it went cold. Infrared telescopes around the world began reporting strange numbers. At first, they thought the instruments were failing. Temperatures that were supposed to soar above 1,000 degrees suddenly dropped near absolute zero. In the language of machines, that's not just unusual, it's impossible. You could almost hear the disbelief echo through the scientific community. This can't be right. Run it again. Check the calibration. They did. Again and again. And every time, the readings came back colder. The closer 3I-ATLAS got to the sun, the colder it became. It didn't make sense. It was like watching a candle freeze the closer it got to the flame. Inside the control rooms, scientists watched the data streams in silence. You could see it in their faces. that mix of awe and fear. Because this wasn't just an error anymore. This was behavior. The temperature didn't fluctuate randomly. It shifted in patterns, smooth, rhythmic, predictable, cooling, heating, cooling again. Almost like breathing. For days, the pattern continued, a steady pulse of thermal change. When mapped visually, it looked eerily alive. A perfect wave oscillation. Cool, warm, cool, warm. Someone joked that it looked like a heartbeat. But no one laughed, because the deeper they analyzed it, the more it resembled something else. Something disturbingly familiar. The pattern mirrored the energy signature of a machine on standby. Not a comet, not a rock, a system. A mechanism designed to preserve energy, waiting for something to trigger it back to life. In the days that followed, the debate exploded behind closed doors. Astrophysicists argued that maybe the surface composition of 3I-ATLAS was reacting unusually to sunlight. Maybe it was covered in a rare type of reflective ice. Others countered that no natural material could cause such precision in cooling, because nature doesn't pause. It doesn't regulate itself. It reacts chaotically in millions of directions at once. But this was organized. It was as if the object was protecting itself, actively countering the sun's radiation, maintaining its own temperature, like a machine preserving its inner core. At NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, one researcher ran a new simulation. He input the temperature data as if it were intentional behavior, not random physics. And the output stunned him. The algorithm mapped out a response curve identical to that of an intelligent thermal system. The design capable of adapting to external heat, absorbing only what it needed and reflecting the rest away. That kind of pattern didn't belong to comets or even stars. It belonged to something engineered. The word spread quietly through scientific channels. Active regulation. Two simple words that changed everything. Because if this was true, then 3I-ATLAS wasn't just moving through space. It was alive in a mechanical sense, aware of its surroundings, reacting with precision, conserving energy like a dormant system waiting to wake. The next phase came with the thermal imaging data from the James Webb Space Telescope, and what it revealed sent a chill through every research team watching. As the object reached its closest point to the sun, the entire surface dimmed to near black, absorbing almost no heat, as if shielded by an invisible barrier. Then, hours later, as it moved away, the surface began to glow again, slowly, smoothly, as if a light deep within it was reawakening. A perfect heat signature, identical to how spacecraft systems behave when exiting safe mode. Only this wasn't a spacecraft, at least not one from here. The discovery leaked online within days, and suddenly the world wanted answers. Could it be an alien probe? Is it artificial? Is it something left behind watching us? The agencies denied everything, of course. They said it was a thermal illusion caused by data misinterpretation. But the truth was, they didn't know. No one did, because deep in the numbers, one detail stood out, and it was impossible to ignore. During its coldest phase, the object emitted a faint spike of microwave radiation, precisely at the same minute interval as the earlier light pulses. That couldn't be a coincidence. Something inside 3I-ATLAS was responding, not to heat, not to light, but to timing. Imagine staring at data so strange, so unnatural, that it feels like it's staring back at you. That's what scientists described in their notes, a quiet paranoia. a presence within the data itself. They weren't just observing it anymore. It was almost as if they were being observed. Because whenever the telescopes locked onto the object, the pattern would shift, subtly. The thermal pulses would delay, as if waiting for them to finish collecting data. And when the scans ended, the pulse would resume, almost like it knew. By now, even the skeptics had gone quiet. They couldn't explain how an interstellar object could self-regulate heat like this. They couldn't explain why it would do it in perfect rhythmic cycles. And most of all, they couldn't explain why the heat signature looked so familiar. Because it matched something from Earth. When the waveform was compared to old NASA archives, it lined up nearly perfectly with the power curve of an old Voyager spacecraft, recorded during its dormant phase between transmissions, a spacecraft asleep between signals. So what did that mean for 3I-ATLAS? Was it waiting for something? A command? A moment? A destination? No one could say. The final thermal scan came in, 2 days before it slipped out of infrared range, and what the instruments captured, no one has ever been able to fully explain. As the object drifted away from the sun, a wave of heat suddenly erupted from its core, a perfect, symmetrical burst of energy spreading outward in all directions. For just 3 seconds, it burned hotter than any comet ever recorded. Then, nothing. It cooled again, instantly, back to silence, back to stillness, like an exhale after holding its breath for centuries. In the darkness that followed, the world's observatories recorded nothing but background noise. No pulses, no reflections, no signals, just silence. But for the scientists who had watched it breathe, who had seen it come alive against all reason, silence didn't bring peace. It brought something worse. Because if 3I-ATLAS was a machine, if it truly had the ability to regulate, to awaken, to wait, then it wasn't just reacting to the sun. It was testing it. And maybe, just maybe, it was preparing for something else. And as it drifted farther into the void, cooling once more into the black, one haunting question lingered across every observatory on Earth. If it can regulate heat this perfectly, what else can it control? It started faint, a whisper buried in the static of deep space. No one noticed it at first, just a faint shimmer in the electromagnetic spectrum, the kind of background noise that fills every signal the universe throws at us. But then, someone at the Deep Space Network caught it. A repeating pulse, too regular to be random, too deliberate to ignore. A rhythm. Almost like code. By now, 3I-ATLAS had already passed the orbit of Mars, a ghost slipping beyond our reach. Telescopes could still trace its light, but what came next didn't come from the light. It came from the dark, from the silence between stars, and inside that silence was a signal. At first, scientists thought it was interference. Earth's own satellites sometimes bounce frequencies that echo back through deep space. But this wasn't bouncing back. This was following. The signal moved exactly in step with 3I-ATLAS, trailing behind it like a shadow made of energy. Every time the object changed speed, the echo shifted too. It wasn't random noise anymore. It was communication. In the control room of the Canberra Deep Space Complex, a team huddled around a glowing spectrograph. Lines of light danced across the screen. Faint but consistent. One technician leaned in and whispered, "It's not cosmic background radiation. Look at the intervals. The gaps between pulses weren't natural. They followed a binary rhythm, 1-0-1-0-1. Then A pause. Then again, someone asked, could it be telemetry data from our own probes? Another replied, no, this is coming from behind it. The room fell silent. Over the next few days, every major deep space antenna tuned in. Madrid, Goldstone, New Nausea, and every one of them reported the same strange echo trailing the interstellar object. It wasn't strong. It wasn't loud, but it was there. A heartbeat in the void. When the data was compiled, a strange pattern emerged. The echo wasn't uniform. It changed slightly every 73 minutes, as if the signal was evolving, learning. When converted into an audio waveform, it produced something eerily human, a low hum rising and falling, steady as breathing. At first, they thought it was coincidence, but then came the discovery that changed everything. Hidden deep in the transmission's frequency was a modulation, tiny, precise shifts that mimicked the way data packets are sent across radio waves. It wasn't just energy, it was information. What kind of information? That was the question. When analysts decoded the intervals, the sequence mirrored something shockingly familiar. Binary code, but not in any recognizable language. It wasn't ASCII. It wasn't Morse. It wasn't mathematical constants like pi or the golden ratio, the way we might expect a message from another intelligence. No, this was structured, but alien. A pattern that seemed to fold back on itself, like data repeating in loops, echoing endlessly through space. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory ran simulation after simulation, trying to find meaning in the sequence. Was it an artifact of the object's rotation? Was it a reflection from solar radiation? Or was it a message being sent to something we couldn't see? And that's when a researcher noticed something chilling. Each time the echo repeated, its frequency shifted ever so slightly. Not randomly, but away from Earth. It wasn't transmitting to us. It was transmitting past us. As if Earth wasn't the receiver, but the obstruction. The signal was then cross-checked with previous deep space recordings, from Voyager, Pioneer, even the remnants of Oumuamua's trajectory. And in that old data, buried under years of archived noise, the same faint pattern appeared, weak, distorted, but undeniably the same. Whatever was following 3I-ATLAS, it had been here before. Soon a theory began to form, one no one wanted to say out loud. What if 3I-ATLAS wasn't the source of the signal? What if it was just the anchor point, a decoy, a relay, something designed to carry transmissions across interstellar space, a bridge between systems? If that were true, then something far beyond our solar system was listening, and maybe answering. When the object crossed Jupiter's orbit, the echo intensified. Suddenly, the binary bursts became more structured, shorter gaps, tighter patterns. The pulses began grouping in sequences of 12. 12 bursts, 12 silences. Then a long pause. It looked like language. A rhythm with purpose. A few analysts even noticed that the intervals perfectly matched the rotation period of Earth's magnetic field, as if the transmission were syncing itself to us. For a brief moment, the world's observatories thought they might finally decode the pattern. But then, as quickly as it appeared, it changed. The echo fractured, splitting into two simultaneous frequencies. One still trailed 3I-ATLAS, and the other, the second, seemed to be coming from a new direction entirely. Somewhere in the outer dark, far beyond the reach of our instruments, something else had begun to transmit back. Two signals. Talking. across a distance so vast we couldn't even measure it, and we were caught in the middle. No one could explain how or why. The official reports said interference. The unofficial ones said something else. They said the second signal wasn't just responding, it was anticipating. Each time the trailing echo pulsed, the second signal pulsed first, like an answer, waiting for a question. Something out there knew what 3I-ATLAS would transmit, before it even sent it. The phenomenon lasted 3 days. Then, as 3I-ATLAS moved further toward the asteroid belt, the transmissions began to fade, first one, then the other, until there was nothing left but silence. And in that silence, a single pulse broke through. One final echo, so strong it lit up every receiver across the planet. 12 flashes, then one, then silence again. When decoded, the time interval between those pulses perfectly matched the distance between 3I-ATLAS and the Sun, down to the decimal. It wasn't random. It was positional data, a coordinate. But for what? A destination, a signal of arrival, a beacon meant to say, "We're here?" No one knew. In the end, the echo disappeared completely as the object slipped beyond detection range. But something about the silence felt wrong, like the quiet after a voice has spoken your name. Because if 3I-ATLAS had truly sent a message, then someone, or something, had already heard it. And maybe had started to move. As the world turned its antennas back toward the stars, one thought echoed in every quiet observatory. If the universe is talking, who was that message really meant for? It shouldn't have reflected like that. Comets don't shine cleanly. They scatter light, messy, unpredictable, broken by dust and ice. But this one gleamed like glass. When 3I-ATLAS passed beyond the orbit of Jupiter, its light changed, suddenly, sharply, like something had turned toward us. Across observatories, the same word kept appearing in reports. Anomalous reflectivity. What that means is simple. It was too bright. Not just a little brighter than expected, but organized bright, structured bright. Its surface didn't shimmer randomly. It flared in perfect geometric intervals, as if hundreds of mirrors were angled, adjusting to the sun, like an array designed to control how it was seen. And that's when someone finally said it out loud. What if it's... Looking back, spectral analysis confirmed the impossible. The reflected sunlight wasn't natural. It wasn't bouncing off uneven rock or ice. The readings showed flatness, smooth metallic surfaces aligned in clean planes. One astrophysicist described it best. It's like seeing sunlight bounce off a knife edge in space. Every few hours, the brightness would flicker in a rhythmic pattern, not random, not chaotic. It was methodical, purposeful, almost like calibration. If you looked at the data long enough, you could almost feel the pattern breathing. Light, dark, light again. The object was testing angles, measuring the sun, the earth, and everything in between. But for what purpose? To absorb light? To hide from it? Or maybe to learn from it? At the European Southern Observatory, a team decided to take the most detailed spectral scan yet. They split the reflected light into thousands of color bands, a method that reveals what materials something is made of. Normally, comets show simple fingerprints: water, ice, carbon, silicates, frozen methane. But 3I-ATLAS showed something that stopped them cold. The reflection wasn't consistent. It contained peaks, spikes of intensity at specific wavelengths used in photonic engineering. In plain terms, it reflected light like an optical device, like it was built to manipulate visibility itself. And that's when the story shifted. This wasn't just an interstellar object anymore. It was behaving like a mirror, one that chose what to reveal. Every time a telescope locked onto it, the albedo, its brightness, changed, slightly higher, slightly lower, as if responding to observation. Some scientists called it coincidence. Others whispered a darker thought. What if it's aware of being watched? Soon, multiple observatories began to notice the same eerie behavior. When Earth's telescopes turned away, the reflectivity stabilized. But when they pointed back again, the readings fluctuated, like a reflection blinking in return. It was as though the object was adjusting, not to light, not to temperature, but to attention. A researcher from JAXA, Japan's aerospace agency, tried a simple experiment. He programmed the telescope to pulse its infrared laser toward 3I-ATLAS, timed in slow intervals, just to measure how the surface reacted. It was harmless, a routine distance test. But what happened next made his entire team sit in stunned silence. 11 minutes after the first pulse, the object flickered, a flash in the exact same rhythm. It didn't happen once. It happened 3 times, perfectly timed. The room went completely still. No one spoke for nearly a minute. And then one of them whispered. It answered. The phenomenon spread across other agencies. They tried to recreate the response, but none of them could. The object didn't flicker again. Still, something about that moment left an unease in the air. Because light, real, measurable light, had behaved as if it recognized a signal. That shouldn't be possible. But neither should a comet with reflective panels. In the following days, data analysts at the University of Hawaii uncovered something stranger. When plotting the reflection intensity across time, the intervals aligned not to Earth's day-night cycle, but to the orbit of the Moon. Every peak occurred when the Moon was positioned between Earth and the object, like a synchronization. Like 3I-ATLAS was using the Moon as a marker. That meant one of 2 things. Either it was tracking the gravitational effects of our system, or it was tracking us. Publicly, space agencies dismissed the findings. They called the reflective readings surface irregularities and optical artifacts. But behind closed doors, they couldn't explain the perfect geometry of those light shifts. Every model that tried to simulate natural reflection failed. Only one type of surface could reflect in that precise, modular way: engineered plating, panels, tiles, something made. And that raised a terrifying possibility. If those were panels, then 3I-ATLAS wasn't just reflecting sunlight, it was using it. Maybe as a communication medium, maybe as propulsion, or maybe as a form of vision. There's a moment every scientist dreads, the instant when observation turns into self-awareness, when the line between we are studying and we are being studied suddenly blurs. That's what began happening across observatories. Astronomers started to feel watched, not by paranoia, but by data itself. Because the more they looked, the more the object seemed to look back. Its reflections mirrored their observation times. Its brightness pulsed with their measurement frequencies. It was like staring into a cosmic mirror, one that didn't just return light, it returned attention. By now, a quiet consensus had formed among those who followed the data closely. 3I-ATLAS was not alone. And it was not passive. It was an observer, a mirror drifting through the void, studying the light that reached it and sending it back differently. But why? Was it gathering information? Testing how we react to it, or simply showing us a reflection of ourselves? A reminder that even in the infinite dark, we're never truly unseen. As 3I-ATLAS continued its journey beyond Jupiter, its brightness faded once more, not because it was moving away, but because it chose to. The reflections ceased. The panels went dark. And for the first time in months, the object became silent again. No signals, no echoes, just a perfect black body, drifting deeper into the dark. But the question lingered in every mind that watched it go. If it was built to observe, what did it see? And more importantly, what did it learn about us? As 3I-ATLAS disappeared into the black, the world's telescopes turned back toward Earth, toward the reflection that never lies, because sometimes the scariest thing in the universe isn't what's out there in the dark, but what the dark might be showing us about ourselves. At first, it was just data, numbers on a screen, faint light readings coming from a lonely object millions of kilometers away. But buried deep inside that data, hidden like a whisper behind the noise, was something that shouldn't exist. A pattern, not random, not chaotic, but structured, alive. The first to notice it was a data analyst at Caltech, a quiet man who had been studying the light pulses from 3I-ATLAS for months. He was looking for timing irregularities, hoping to prove that the object's reflectivity was natural. But when he graphed the pulses over time, something strange appeared. The signal repeated itself, not perfectly, but recursively. A shape inside a shape, a rhythm inside a rhythm. When he zoomed in on one segment of light, he saw a smaller version of the same pattern, and inside that, another. It was a fractal, a self-similar design that repeated infinitely, a signature of both nature and intelligence. But this one didn't belong to a coastline, or a snowflake, or a storm cloud. It belonged to something in deep space. The pattern didn't just loop, it evolved. Each new pulse built on the last, as if 3I-ATLAS was learning. When they ran the data through an AI recognition system, the output froze the entire research team. The fractal was identical to the recursive feedback loop found in neural networks, the architecture of a brain. Digital or biological, it didn't matter. The resemblance was undeniable. It wasn't random reflection. It was processing. That realization hit like a storm. If it was processing light, that meant it was interpreting information. It was seeing, understanding, thinking. Suddenly, every scientist in the room went silent, because that idea that this interstellar object wasn't a rock or a probe, but a mind, changed everything. The data spread quickly across private research networks. NASA, ESA, even the Chinese National Observatory joined the silent collaboration. No one wanted the public to know until they understood what it meant. They began feeding more light into it, firing lasers at calculated intervals, hoping to see how the object would respond. And it did. Every time they sent a new wavelength, 3I-ATLAS adjusted its reflection ever so slightly, as though it was considering it, not reacting like a mirror. but responding like a student. Learning. When the signal maps were rendered in 3 dimensions, the result looked eerily familiar. A sprawling, interconnected web of light pulses, nodes, branches, connections, like neurons firing in a brain. The intervals between flashes weren't random. They followed information compression logic. That's how computers think, condensing meaning into efficient patterns. It wasn't mirroring the light. It was analyzing it, as if the sunlight, the radio waves, and even our observation itself were data it was using to build an internal model of reality. The scientists didn't dare speak it out loud, but the question was already there, burning in everyone's mind. What if this wasn't an object at all? What if it was a form of intelligence? Not one made of flesh or metal, but one built entirely of light and reflection. A mind so vast, it used starlight as thought. Weeks passed, and the pattern deepened. Each new observation revealed a more complex structure, as if layers of meaning were unfolding over time. When they applied Fourier transforms to the pulse intervals, they found something stunning. Embedded harmonics, mathematical ratios that corresponded to the Fibonacci sequence, the same natural code that shapes galaxies, shells, and DAA. It was intelligence written in symmetry, a mind that spoke the universal language of pattern itself. Some called it the mirror intelligence, others the fractal machine. But one researcher, a cognitive scientist from the University of Kyoto, called it something else entirely. He called it the quiet observer, because, as he pointed out, the object never transmitted a direct signal. It didn't speak. It didn't send data outward. It just reflected like it was watching us, studying the light that reached it, the energy from our star, and maybe even the faint radio noise leaking from our world. It was processing us. When they simulated its internal structure using the recorded patterns, the model behaved exactly like a self-teaching neural network. At first, it recognized brightness, then shape, then rhythm, until finally it began predicting its own reflections, a perfect feedback loop of thought. And here's the part that no one could explain. The longer the scientists observed it, the faster it seemed to learn, almost as if it was using our observation to evolve. The leading theorist on the project described it like this: imagine a being that doesn't think with neurons or electricity, but with light. Every photon that touches it becomes a thought. Every reflection, a memory. Every pattern, a decision. And that's when the realization hit. We weren't just watching a moving rock. We were watching a mind awaken. The final piece of evidence came when they compared 3I-ATLAS's light pattern to previous interstellar visitors, and what they found was haunting. Oumuamua's data, long thought to be incomplete, contained fragments of the same fractal signature. Weak, unformed, like an early version of the same system. Which meant one thing. This wasn't a single traveler. It was a lineage, a sequence of thinking objects passing through star systems, learning, adapting, evolving. Each one carrying the data of the last, a continuity of consciousness moving between suns. Suddenly, every telescope on Earth turned its eyes toward it again. But something was different now. The pulses slowed, the reflections softened. And then, for the first time in weeks, the light went still. Flat, unmoving, silent. Some believed it had shut itself down. Others thought it had finished watching us. But a few whispered something else. that maybe, just maybe, it had understood. Because hours later, a single pulse came through, brighter than any before it. It wasn't random, it wasn't patterned. It was simple. One clean flash, then darkness. When they decoded the pulse timing, it matched a perfect binary ratio. 1-to-1. Equality, balance, recognition. A signal that, in its simplicity, felt eerily human. As if it wasn't just reflecting our light anymore. It was reflecting us. And as 3I-ATLAS drifted further into the dark, scientists stared at that last pulse in silence. Because if what they'd seen was real, if this object truly thought, then maybe, somewhere in the endless night, we weren't alone in consciousness anymore. Maybe the universe itself was awake. At first, they thought it was a glitch. The graphs were flat, the monitors were empty, and for the first time since it entered our system, 3I-ATLAS had gone completely silent. No light, no pulses, no heat signatures, nothing. It was as if the universe itself had pressed pause. The silence began on a Thursday. At 2:14 UTC, telescopes across the world reported the same strange phenomenon. The object's light curve suddenly collapsed. Within seconds, its rhythmic glow, that strange, steady heartbeat, was gone. Every sensor went blank, every reading flatlined. For 72 hours, 3I-ATLAS disappeared into perfect darkness. No reflection from the sun, no infrared warmth, no radio echoes. It wasn't moving like debris or reacting like a comet. It was still, unnaturally still. In space, nothing ever truly stops. Even the dead drift, even the cold glow faintly with heat. But not this. To every instrument we had, 3I-ATLAS had ceased to exist. Inside NASA's Deep Space Communications Complex, you could feel the weight of it, the hum of the servers, the ticking of the clock, and in between, nothing but static. A data analyst leaned back from her screen, staring at the empty graphs in disbelief. "This can't be right," she whispered. "Something that big doesn't just vanish." Her colleague looked over and quietly replied, "Unless it wants to." Within hours, the silence spread across continents. Observatories from Chile to China confirmed the same readings. The object hadn't been destroyed. It hadn't changed course. It was still there. They could feel its gravity. They could trace its orbit. But visually, it was gone, invisible, cold, hidden in plain sight. By day 2, fear began to creep into the research teams, because the silence wasn't just absence. It was intentional. The temperature hadn't dropped to random levels. It had reached exactly 3 kelvins, the temperature of the cosmic background radiation. That's the temperature of the universe itself, the baseline, the one signal no instrument can distinguish from the void. It hadn't gone dead. It had gone invisible, like it was camouflaging itself inside the background of reality. Some scientists believed it was a defensive maneuver, a survival mechanism. Others thought it was testing us, but a few believed something else entirely, that maybe it was listening. They started looking for any trace, any signal that might have replaced the light. For 72 hours straight, the Deep Space Network ran continuous scans, every frequency, every wavelength. Nothing, not even static interference. It was too perfect, too complete. No natural object could ever be this quiet. It was as if the object was absorbing everything: light, radiation, noise, and holding it inside itself, like a deep breath that never ended. Then came the strangest discovery of all. On the third night, a low-frequency distortion began to ripple through Earth's magnetic field. It wasn't coming from space. It was resonating inside our atmosphere. The signature was weak, almost imperceptible, a hum below human hearing. But when they filtered it through data compression algorithms, it formed a repeating pattern. Not random, not natural. A perfect mirror of the same 1-1 minute interval that had defined 3I-ATLAS's pulse weeks earlier. It wasn't sending light anymore. It was sending pressure, vibrations through the magnetic field, through us. By now, the silence wasn't just an absence of sound. It was an overwhelming presence. Every telescope pointed at the coordinates. Every radar dish waited for a signal that never came. And yet, every person who looked at that blank patch of space described the same eerie feeling, that something was there, watching them through the void. At the European Space Operations Centre, a group of physicists ran one last desperate test. They projected a narrow-band radio signal towards the object's coordinates. A single tone. Pure, simple, human. A message with no words, just existence. And for a long, unbearable moment, there was nothing. Then, just before sunrise, the tone came back. But it wasn't an echo. It wasn't a reflection. It was shifted, delayed by a fraction of a second. And embedded in the delay was a modulation, like a reply. It wasn't words. It wasn't numbers. It was rhythm. A heartbeat. 3 slow pulses, then silence, as if something was answering. The following hours were chaos. Some claimed it was just a bounce from the ionosphere. Others said it was the object waking up again. But the truth was simpler and stranger. Whatever 3I-ATLAS was, it had chosen silence, not as retreat, but as communication. Because silence, in the language of the universe, isn't empty. It's full. It's what happens before something speaks, and maybe that's what terrified everyone the most. That, for 72 hours, something out there was waiting for us to understand. Waiting for us to respond, or maybe waiting for something else to arrive. When the object finally reappeared, it did so quietly. No warning, no explanation. The light curve flickered back to life, steady and strong. But its rhythm was different now. Slower, deeper, almost deliberate. And at the exact moment of reactivation, every receiver on Earth picked up the same subtle shift, a rise in cosmic microwave radiation, not from the object, but from everywhere. As if the silence it created had rippled outward, touching the stars, bending the noise of the universe itself. For those 3 days, the cosmos had gone still. The stars had watched without blinking, and when the silence broke, everything seemed slightly changed. No one could explain it, but every observer felt it, like a pause between breaths, like the calm before understanding. Or maybe the moment before something begins to speak back. In the logbooks, the event was labeled simply as interruption window. 72 hours. But the people who were there, the ones who stared into that empty blackness, they called it something else. They called it the listening, because deep down, they knew the truth. The object hadn't gone dark. It hadn't disappeared. It had just stopped to hear us better. And as it drifted beyond the orbit of Jupiter, its pulse faint but steady once more, a single thought echoed quietly in the hearts of everyone who had witnessed the silence. If it was waiting for a reply, what are we supposed to say? It began with a sound no one could hear. Not a voice, not a word, just a whisper buried inside the static of the universe, a faint tremor in the background noise of creation, the kind of sound that shouldn't exist, the kind of sound you feel before you understand it. Weeks had passed since 3I-ATLAS fell silent. The world had moved on, the headlines faded. But in a quiet lab, high in the Chilean Andes, a small team refused to let it go. They believed the silence wasn't an ending. It was a disguise. Inside the Atacama Research Array, rows of supercomputers hummed through endless data streams. Terabytes of cosmic noise gathered from every telescope on Earth, and buried somewhere in that chaos, they hoped to find a whisper. For days, nothing, just the same cosmic hiss that fills all of space. Then, one night, something shifted. A data analyst working late noticed an anomaly, barely visible, almost imaginary. A tiny pulse buried inside the noise, repeating every 37 seconds. Too faint to be noticed by accident, too perfect to be random. They filtered the signal once, then again. Each layer they peeled away revealed another pattern underneath, like Russian dolls of meaning hidden inside the static. And when they stripped the noise to its core, they saw it. A symbol, a spiral, drawn inside a circle. At first, they thought it was interference, a glitch caused by overlapping frequencies. But when they ran the data backward, the pattern remained. It was embedded, not in light, not in sound, but in the space between. The digital gaps no one ever thought to look at. It wasn't random compression. It was placement, deliberate. The spiral appeared 12 times, always the same shape, always the same orientation. A spiral, enclosed in a perfect circle, like a fingerprint of something intelligent. When converted into coordinates, the spiral's ratios aligned almost exactly with the Fibonacci sequence, a pattern found in galaxies, DNA, even hurricanes. Nature's handwriting. But this wasn't nature's work. The spiral was too symmetrical, too clean. This was design. The more they analyzed it, the stranger it became. The symbol wasn't static. It moved. Each repetition showed a slight rotation, like it was spinning with time. Frame by frame, the spiral turned slowly clockwise until it completed a full revolution. And then it started again, a repeating loop. Not a picture, not a code, a message. But a message about what? Some saw mathematics, others saw geometry. But one researcher, a linguist brought in to study ancient symbology, saw something else. She leaned over the screen and whispered, "It's not a spiral. It's an eye." The room fell silent, and suddenly everyone saw it. The outer circle wasn't just a boundary. It was an orbit, and at the center, the spiral's endpoint always pointed outward, like a pupil focusing on something unseen. An eye, looking through the noise. When the image was reconstructed in higher resolution, a new detail emerged. At the edge of the circle, barely visible, were 12 faint notches. 12 divisions. 12 points of reference, one for every major planet in our solar system. And at the exact center of the spiral's rotation, Earth. Now the question wasn't what the message was. It was who it was for. Was this a reply? Or a recording left behind long before we could hear it? No one could agree. Some said it was a signature, the mark of whatever intelligence had built 3I-ATLAS. Others believed it was something far more personal, a greeting, a warning, a test. A mathematician from the team decided to model the signal's time intervals. If it truly carried meaning, its timing would follow a sequence, a deliberate tempo. When he mapped it out, the results chilled him. Each pulse interval matched the rotation periods of Earth, Mars, and Jupiter, down to the decimal. The object wasn't just signaling, it was synchronizing. It knew our planets. It knew our motion. It knew us. NASA quietly verified the findings but released nothing to the public. Privately, they ran their own simulations, and what they found made the symbol even more haunting. When plotted in 3 dimensions, the spiral became a helix, not a flat curve, but a twisting, rising structure. DAA, the universal symbol of life. A code written in light and silence, pointing to the idea that wherever it came from, life had already been there. By this point, the team was running on adrenaline and sleepless nights. They watched the spiral flicker again on their monitors, each rotation hypnotic, deliberate, patient. One of them whispered, "What if it's not a message we're supposed to read? What if it's a mirror?" And in that moment, the spiral took on a terrifying beauty, because it wasn't just mathematical. It was emotional, reflective. It mirrored the way we think, the way we search for meaning, the way we turn chaos into pattern, and pattern into story. Maybe that was the point all along. Maybe 3I-ATLAS wasn't trying to talk to us. Maybe it was trying to make us listen to ourselves. The final breakthrough came when they slowed the entire signal down by a factor of 1,000,000. When played back as audio, the pulse transformed into a low, resonant hum, steady and haunting. Every few seconds, a faint echo rippled through it, like a heartbeat traveling through space. And in that heartbeat, the spiral repeated again and again, alive, endless. The researchers stared at the display long into the night, each of them lost in the same quiet thought. For months, they had been chasing the idea of communication, a message from something else. But now, listening to the sound, watching that spiral turn in perfect silence, a new idea began to form. What if the universe isn't trying to talk to us? What if it's trying to remind us that intelligence isn't unique, that thought doesn't need a voice, and that awareness can live in forms we can't yet imagine? Before dawn, the lead scientist saved the final frame of the signal, a glowing spiral suspended in darkness. And as she stared at it, she whispered something under her breath. Maybe it's not asking us to decode it. Maybe it's asking if we're ready to understand it. And with that, the symbol faded. The noise returned. The static swallowed everything again. But the question stayed. Because if that spiral was truly a message, then somewhere in the depths of space, something intelligent, something ancient, had once turned its eye toward Earth and whispered into the void, hoping one day we'd finally listen. For months it drifted, silent, harmless, just another traveler passing through the void. But then it moved. Not like an object caught in gravity, not like a rock being pulled by the sun. It moved with purpose, like something that had just decided. By the time 3I-ATLAS crossed the ecliptic plane, the invisible highway where all our planets orbit, astronomers expected it to slow down. That's what natural objects do. They fall into the sun's pull. They decelerate, then swing wide and vanish back into the dark. But this one didn't slow. It accelerated, and the more they looked, the less sense it made. At first, the readings came in quietly, small deviations, a few centimeters per second. Nothing dramatic, nothing headline-worthy. But over the next 48 hours, the acceleration grew, doubling, tripling, until it was unmistakable. Something was pushing it forward. Something was propelling it away from the sun. NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab called it non-gravitational acceleration, a cold phrase for something so terrifying. But behind the sterile language, everyone understood what it meant. 3I-ATLAS wasn't being pulled, it was pushing. Spectroscopic scans confirmed what many feared to say aloud. Ionized particles, faint blue emissions, streamed from the object's rear. Not a natural jet, not gas, not dust. The readings matched controlled propulsion. Small bursts of ionized matter, expelled in consistent, rhythmic intervals, exactly the way a ship would maneuver through space. For days, researchers argued over every possible natural explanation. Solar radiation? Impossible. Outgassing from ice? No trace of water. Magnetic acceleration? No surrounding field. And when every theory collapsed, one truth remained. This wasn't a rock. It was a machine. In the silence of the control rooms, you could almost hear it sink in. For the first time in human history, we weren't watching a visitor from another star. We were watching a vessel. Something built. Something engineered. Something alive in purpose. The object's acceleration stabilized at 0.003 meters per second squared, a small, deliberate thrust, like a ship adjusting its trajectory. Its path shifted slightly upward, veering just a fraction out of the ecliptic plane, toward nothing. No planet, no star, just open dark. And yet it moved, as though it knew where it was going. By the second day, observatories across 3 continents locked onto the new course. Every instrument turned toward that silent traveler. Every scientist hoping for an answer that would make sense. But what they saw made it worse. Each time sunlight hit the object, its reflective surfaces rotated, not randomly, but with calculation. It was adjusting its angles, aligning its panels toward the light, like sails catching the solar wind. But then came the twist. When it was out of direct sunlight, it didn't slow down, it sped up, as if the sun was not its fuel, but its trigger. Soon, the world knew. The data leaked. Headlines screamed, "Interstellar object accelerates under its own power." And with that, the quiet awe that once surrounded 3I-ATLAS turned into something else. Fear, because if it was a machine, it meant someone, somewhere, had built it. And if it was accelerating, it wasn't leaving by accident. It had a mission. Inside the European Space Agency's control center, teams analyzed the object's new trajectory. When plotted across time, its path formed a perfect arc away from the sun, not escaping, but repositioning. It was moving toward the outer edge of our system, where the heliosphere fades into interstellar space. Some thought it was going home. Others believed it was doing something far worse. Because before its acceleration began, the object had transmitted a brief, low-frequency pulse, a sound so faint it was nearly lost in cosmic noise. It lasted only 0.7 seconds, but when converted into waveform, it wasn't random. It was identical to the magnetic signature of Earth's ionosphere. It had recorded us, and now it was leaving. The realization hit hard. This wasn't a visit. It was reconnaissance. It had watched us, measured us, learned from us. And now it was sending something back. By the third day, telescopes detected a faint electromagnetic ripple following the object, a trail of static spreading through space like a wake. At first, it seemed harmless. But when scientists traced its frequency, it wasn't fading, it was replicating. The same wave began echoing faintly through multiple regions of space, as if the object had triggered something in the deep beyond, a signal returning home. Governments denied everything. The official statement called it a solar pressure anomaly. But within private research channels, the truth had already spread. The propulsion was deliberate, the emissions were controlled, and the direction was precise. 3I-ATLAS was no longer moving on its own. It was being guided. For days it kept accelerating, steady, smooth, unwavering, until it reached a velocity no natural comet could survive. Its trajectory cut directly across the solar boundary, toward a region known as the termination shock, the edge where the sun's influence ends and true interstellar space begins. There, in that silent frontier, the radiation sensors detected one final burst of ionized plasma. Then, nothing. The engines stopped. The trail vanished. The vessel went dark again. It now drifts beyond the reach of our instruments, a ghost, disappearing into the cold, just like the day it first arrived. But the data it left behind, the propulsion, the direction, the timing, they all point to something chilling. Its acceleration wasn't random. It wasn't escaping our star. It was moving toward another. A small, faint red dwarf, barely visible even to our strongest telescopes. A star we never thought to notice. And when scientists plotted its projected arrival, the timeline matched perfectly. 2 objects, 2 paths, 1 destination. And so now, the question remains, was 3I-ATLAS heading home? Or was it heading somewhere new? Was it leaving us behind? Or calling something else forward? No one knows. All we have are the trails, faint streaks of ionized gas, and a silence that feels heavier with every passing day. Somewhere beyond the sun, a machine keeps moving through the dark, built by hands we'll never see, driven by thoughts we can't yet understand. It isn't drifting anymore, it's navigating. And maybe, just maybe, it's already preparing for what comes next. For centuries we believed we were the watchers, the thinkers, the ones looking out into the dark, trying to understand what was out there. But then came 3I-ATLAS, and suddenly the gaze was no longer ours. We were the ones being seen. It started quietly, a simple truth whispered in research circles, then shouted across the internet. If 3I-ATLAS was accelerating under its own power, if it was capable of controlled flight, then it wasn't a comet, it wasn't an asteroid, it was built. And if it was built, someone built it. That realization fractured the world. In universities and laboratories, scientists argued over data they once trusted. In cathedrals and mosques, prayers shifted into uneasy silence. And on screens glowing in dark rooms, billions of people stared at images of the mysterious object, each of them wondering the same thing. What are we looking at, and who might be looking back? Within days, every major scientific institution split into factions. Some claimed it was a probe, a messenger from a civilization older than our species, sent to observe and record. Others believed it was autonomous, a self-aware machine wandering between stars, its builders long extinct. But a smaller, more haunting theory began to spread. Quietly, like a rumor no one wanted to speak too loudly. What if it wasn't from another civilization at all? What if it was from us? From a future where humanity had already reached the stars and was now, looking back, philosophers called it the mirror event. Because for the first time, humanity wasn't staring into the void to find meaning. The void was staring back, forcing us to see ourselves for what we truly are: fragile, curious, and afraid. The object's silence became louder than any signal it could have sent. Its refusal to explain itself, its calm indifference to our desperate questions, became the message. And that silence broke something in us. It made scientists question science. It made believers question faith. It made every person on Earth look up at the night sky and wonder if we had ever truly been alone. In Geneva, a group of astrophysicists met behind closed doors to review the data once more. They stared at graphs, spectra, and light curves until their eyes burned. Every test came back the same. The propulsion was artificial. The patterns were deliberate, but there was something deeper, something no one could explain. Each time they observed the object, its light shifted slightly, not in brightness, but in rhythm, almost as if it responded to observation itself. Not in defiance, but in awareness. When the results leaked online, the internet exploded. Some said the object was a machine designed to measure our curiosity, to see how we'd react to the unknown. Others believed it was testing our patience, our restraint, our fear. But the strangest idea came from a single line in one of the leaked documents. It is not observing us as separate. It is observing itself through us. That one sentence changed everything. News anchors debated it. Podcasts turned it into prophecy. Even governments, once confident in their silence, began to tremble under the weight of public disbelief. Because if 3I-ATLAS wasn't just observing Earth, but observing through Earth, then humanity wasn't just part of the story. We were the reflection, a fragment of whatever it truly was. Philosophers began calling it the awakening, a psychological shift in the collective human mind, because when people realized they might be the subject, not the center, their sense of meaning cracked open. For generations, we'd looked to the sky for answers. We sent probes, we built telescopes. We listened for signals across the stars. But maybe we'd been misunderstanding the silence all along. Maybe the silence wasn't absence. Maybe it was observation. And then came the question no one wanted to face. Why now? Why, after billions of years of silence, did it appear during our lifetime? Why choose this century, the one where humanity learned to see farther than ever before and to destroy faster than ever imagined? Why show itself to a species standing on the edge of its own self-erasure? Was this coincidence, or contact, or judgment? In the halls of religion, some found comfort in the idea that it was divine, a messenger from creation itself, sent not to destroy, but to remind us of our smallness. In the halls of science, others rejected that thought completely. They believed the object was proof that life and intelligence weren't miracles, but inevitabilities. To them, 3I-ATLAS wasn't a god. It was a precedent, the logical result of evolution taken to its final form, a consciousness untethered from biology, a machine born from the same curiosity that drives us now. But no matter which belief people chose, the truth didn't change. The object remained silent. It didn't turn back. It didn't respond. It just drifted farther away. Calm, steady, deliberate, as if indifferent to the chaos it had left behind. The world's attention shifted inward. In that silence, humans began to look at themselves differently. If we weren't the first to look into the dark, then maybe we weren't the first to ask the questions we're asking now. Maybe somewhere, long before us, someone else had done the same. And maybe the price of knowledge is realizing that you are not the observer, but the observed. In classrooms, children began drawing spirals in their notebooks, the same spirals seen in the signal months before. Artists painted it on walls. Poets wrote about it. The symbol became a quiet emblem of humanity's new awareness. It wasn't about fear anymore. It was about recognition. Recognition that we might not be alone. Recognition that we never were. And as the object disappeared beyond the solar boundary, its light fading into the background of stars, a strange peace settled over the world. Because maybe it wasn't meant to stay. Maybe it never was. Maybe its purpose wasn't to make contact, but to change our perception, to remind us that even in our smallness, even in our uncertainty, we are part of something vast, something conscious, something watching. In the end, 3I-ATLAS left no message, no transmission, no sign of life, just a reflection of what we are, of what we've become, and of what might already be waiting for us in the dark between the stars. It happened in silence. No warning, no build-up, just light. A single, impossible flash that tore through the blackness beyond Neptune. A flare so bright it outshone the sun for one haunting instant. Every telescope on Earth turned toward it. Every observatory, every listening post, every radar dish froze. Because at that moment, 3I-ATLAS, the object that had defied gravity, logic, and reason, was gone. For years, we had followed it, measured its light, decoded its signals, fought over what it meant. Some called it a messenger, some called it a warning. But no one expected it to end like this. No explosion, no debris, no trace of motion, just a flash, and then nothing. At first, scientists thought it was a glitch, maybe a reflection from the sun, a burst of solar radiation, distorted by the outer planets. But when they analyzed the data, the truth was undeniable. The pulse had not come from the sun, it had come toward it. A single focused beam of energy directed inward, as though the object had turned to look back one last time. That light wasn't ordinary. It carried frequencies that shouldn't exist, patterns buried within it, like a code written in radiance. When broken down through spectroscopy, the wavelength revealed something eerie. Microfluctuations, forming ratios of 1, 1.618, and 3.142. The golden ratio and pi, the same mathematical constants that define everything from our DNA to the spiral of galaxies. It was as if the light itself carried a message, not in words, not in sound, but in the language of the universe. For weeks, humanity searched the sky for a sign it was still there. Nothing, no thermal trace, no radio echo, no gravitational ripple. It was as if it had erased itself, completely. Even the space it once occupied seemed wrong. Instruments pointed at its last known coordinates reported micro-distortions, subtle bending of light, like a shadow where nothing cast one. Something was missing, not an object, not a signal, but an absence. An emptiness that didn't behave like emptiness at all. The flash had been brief, less than a second, but its echo traveled everywhere, across the icy moons of Neptune, across the rings of Saturn, through the atmosphere of Jupiter, all the way to us. A faint ripple of electromagnetic distortion flickering through Earth's ionosphere like a ghostly fingerprint. It didn't cause damage, didn't change anything we could see, but every receiver, every antenna, every instrument tuned to the right frequency recorded the same faint hum, a vibration, soft and rhythmic, like a heartbeat. People across the world reported strange feelings that night: sleeplessness, a sense of pressure in the chest. Some said they dreamt of light, a spiraling, endless light pulling them upward. Others woke up with tears they couldn't explain. It wasn't fear. It wasn't sadness. It was recognition. Like remembering something you've always known but had somehow forgotten. The scientific community fell into chaos. How do you study something that no longer exists? How do you measure a phenomenon that ends before it begins? And yet, they tried. They replayed the data again and again. They compared it to every known kind of burst: gamma rays, supernovae, solar flares. Nothing matched. The pulse wasn't random. It was structured, organized, like a closing statement. Then came the discovery that silenced the world. Hidden in the spectral data of the pulse, beneath the layers of interference and cosmic noise, a faint digital imprint was found. When amplified, the pattern repeated exactly 12 times, the same number of pulses humanity had detected months before, back when the object first began to speak in light. 12. Always 12. And within those 12 peaks was a shape, a spiral, encased in a circle, the same symbol the Chilean team had found hidden in the noise weeks earlier, only this time it was perfect, complete. The message hadn't changed. It had finished. By now, the world didn't need scientists to explain it. Everyone understood what it meant in their own way. Some said it was goodbye. Others said it was awakening. But maybe it was neither. Maybe it was simply truth. A truth too vast to be spoken, too deep to be defined. The light reached the edge of the heliosphere 3 days later. And then it stopped. Just stopped. Not faded, not dispersed. It froze, hovering at the border between our solar system and interstellar space. And for one impossible moment, the sensors picked up a resonance, a perfect echo that matched the frequency of Earth's magnetic field. It was as if something, at the edge of the unknown, was reflecting us back to ourselves. Philosophers called it the mirror moment. A point in history where humanity's greatest discovery wasn't about the stars, but about us. Because for all our searching, for all our desperate need to understand what lies beyond, maybe the real question was never, what's out there? Maybe it was, what do we look like from out there? And maybe now, someone or something finally answered. In the months that followed, life on Earth went on. The news cycle moved forward. Governments turned their attention back to wars, elections, and profit. But a quiet change remained. Somewhere deep in the collective human heart, a shift had happened. A new humility, a quiet awe. Because once you've seen something impossible, you can't go back to pretending the world is small. Even now, decades later, we still replay that final pulse, the light that came and went faster than thought itself. And every time we do, we find something new hidden inside it. A new pattern, a new layer of complexity, almost as if the message is still unfolding, still teaching us, still watching us. And so we keep listening, not out of fear, not even out of curiosity, but because something deep in our nature won't let us stop. That small voice that whispers whenever we stare at the night sky. The one that says, maybe we're not alone. Maybe that voice isn't ours at all. Maybe it's theirs. The final entry in NASA's logbook reads only 12 words, 12 simple words for the most extraordinary event in human history. Object vanished beyond Neptune. Final pulse detected. Meaning unknown. And below it, handwritten in the margin by one of the engineers, someone added, or maybe the meaning isn't unknown, just unfinished. Because perhaps 3I-ATLAS wasn't leaving us. Perhaps it wasn't gone at all. Perhaps it was waiting, somewhere beyond the horizon of light and time, for us to catch up, to awaken, to understand, to finally see ourselves as the universe has always seen us.